Well, good morning everybody. Back again. Had a couple of interesting messages, comments, things sent to me. So just quickly go through a couple of them. Firstly, a big thank you to somebody who goes by the name of Fleetside, who got in touch with me, sent me a very interesting analysis of truth analyses, a very comprehensive look at the different theories as to what could have happened to Teresa Halbach. Looking through it, somewhat of a, if you like, an Occam's razor approach to seeing which theory ticks the most boxes, which is the more probable. So hopefully I've shared it with the Dude and McGilla and Will and a few others to get feedback, Mark, Stacey, as I say, to get feedback from them. And hopefully we'll discuss further the document that Fleetside sent me in Sunday's chat with McGilla and Rule. And maybe if Fleetside, if you'd like to join us and give your sort of explanations as to a little bit more insight as to what the document's about. Very interesting document, as I say, but I'll leave it at that as a nice little taster of what to look forward to. So moving swiftly on, I got a message from a YouTuber who commented, a fellow called Chad Terly, or Terly. I'll just read what he wrote, which was quite good, albeit from a different perspective. Chad Terly wrote, "I believe Stephen Avery did it, but if an independent court decides that the original trial was unfair, I'm all for a retrial. But I think one thing both sides need to be very aware of, even alarmed at, is that with all the making a murderer hype and madness, it's probably completely impossible to have a fair trial. Everyone has been fed with so many facts and myths that it will be hard to start with a clean slate, and that has to be the default situation for any trial. It became an even bigger mess than the original tragedy already was." Well, there's certainly plenty to agree with there. Yes, definitely. In order to have a fair trial, the default setting should be without any kind of Ken Kratz press conferences that completely destroyed any prospect of a fair trial. But anyway, let's just go through what Chad has written, sort of a sentence at a time. He first of all said, "I believe Stephen Avery did it." And one of the problems for me is the fact that if it turns out, as a lot of people think, that Brad Dassey is involved in the disappearance of Teresa, the big problem then is that brings the disappearance of Teresa Halbach right onto the salvage yard, right onto the next door neighbour of Stephen Avery. So yes, you can see how by association there's this problem that people might think Stephen Avery was involved, that Brendan was involved, that most of the Avery family were there happily taking a video of all that was going on, because that's, at one point, that is what Wiegand and Fassbender were asking Brendan about. There must have been a video taken or photographs taken. Anyway, so yes, I do get the fact that there seems to have been a murder committed on Cross Road, right next to the salvage yard, but next to the salvage yard, not on the salvage yard. And as I say, if Bobby Dassey and Scott Taddick are involved in the disappearance, then that would, bring the case right to Stephen's next door neighbour. Then he put, but if an independent court decides that the original trial was unfair, I would just like to point out not just the original trial, but trials, 2 trials. There were 2 very unfair trials. 2 trials that never should have occurred. Yeah, the wrongful conviction in 85 and the 2007 case should never have gone to trial when you have got that blatant conflict of interest with Manitowoc Sheriff's Departments discovering the evidence, due to the fact, of course, that Lenk and Colburn are these crackerjack detectives that can discover evidence that Calumet County officials cannot find. So yes, 2 very, very unfair trials that never, ever should have happened. And then obviously you carry on with the fact that I'm all for a retrial, but with all the M&M hype, it's probably completely impossible to have a fair trial. Well, the interesting thing there, well, first of all, obviously, you know, if the bottom line is, look, if there is a retrial and it's unfair and it's biased towards Stephen Avery, well, you know, that's 2 to 1. You know, it's. But anyway, that's being slightly flippant. Let's look at it, you know, sort of more seriously than that. When Kathleen Zellner was given certain evidence to test, it was agreed with the Assistant Attorney General of Wisconsin that there should be an evidentiary hearing. But isn't it funny how within days of Tom Fallon saying to Kathleen Zellner, we'll need to work out how to get the RAV4 to you, Judge Angela Sukovich closes it down. So on the one hand, you've got the state accepting that there's going to be an evidentiary hearing, quite clearly saying, yeah, we accept that there's going to have to be this is going to have to be litigated on. And then at county level, Judge Angela Sukovich closes it down. Within days, as I say, of the the fear on behalf of Manitowoc and Calumet that Kathleen Zellner is going to get her hands on the RAV4, and also strongly suspect it's the fact that they're talking about giving her the bones back to test when they know that they've already been handed back. Just giving Kathleen Zellner the runaround. Certainly I'm of the opinion that the state have U-turned on their commitment to this evidentiary hearing. They are fighting tooth and nail, it would seem, to avoid an evidentiary hearing. Why? Because they know perfectly well that an evidentiary hearing would expose everything. There would never even be any need of a retrial. You know, from our point of view, the obvious solution to this is, number one, immediately release Stephen Avery and Brendan Dassey and say, from the state's point of view, from the Department of Justice, they should be saying, right, we want a proper investigation as to how the hell Manitowoc and Calumet got into this mess. Okay, yes, thanks to Laura Riccardi, Laura Riccardi and Moira Demos. I do apologise, I went and got a fill-in today, and it's still a bit numb around my top lip here, so struggling a wee bit. Anyway, just as coherent as normal, I can hear the dude saying. But let's think a little bit more about the wonderful Judge Flowers, Angela Sukovich. Remember that since the inception of the Wisconsin Crime Victims' Rights Board, the chairman was the former Calumet County District Attorney, the disgraced Kenneth Rapist Kratz. And he served on the Crime Victims' Rights Board right up until, as I say, from its inception, which I believe was either 1988 or 89, right through till he had to resign from it in 2009. So he was the chairman. Now, Judge Angela Sukovich has had a law office in Sheboygan since 1991. But she wasn't actually appointed a judge until the 9th of July 2010, and she served as a replacement for Gary Langhoff, who was taking retirement, until the end of July 2011, when she was re-elected. But she was a member of the Crime Victims' Rights Board. And there's not many people on this Crime Victims' Rights Board. And she was appointed a member of that board by Jim Doyle, who also appointed her as judge 2010 on July the 9th. On May the 10th of 2004, Jim Doyle appointed Angela Sukovich onto the Crime Victims' Rights Board. So let's put that in chronological order, okay? Angela Sukovich starts her law office in 1991. In 2004, Jim Doyle appoints her to the Crime Victims' Rights Board because he's allowed to appoint certain people onto the board. And she served for 6 years, which takes us very conveniently to July the 9th, 2010, when she took over as a judge. So she wasn't a judge on the Crime Victims' Rights Board, but she was a member of that board as an appointee of Jim Doyle, where she would have had direct contact meetings, etc., phone conferences, all that kind of stuff, with none other than Ken Rapist Kratz. And then you begin to see what's going on there. That whilst Tom Fallon realises that there's problems his end, obviously he knows perfectly well that the bones have been handed back. Him and Norm Gowan were part of the team that handed them back. But when it comes to testing of the RAV4, one wonders if he knew that that would be problematic for Calumet, because it's amazing, isn't it? As I say, within days of this agreement between Kathleen Zellner and Tom Fallon, that they are going to look at getting hold of the RAV4, Angela Sukovich jumps in and shuts it down. And of course has been really, really awkward when it comes to the search for truth and justice in this case. She really does want it to just go away and for nothing to happen. But unfortunately, I can only see one way forward, and that is this evidentiary hearing, long before there's even mention of a trial. It's interesting that Brad Schimmel, when he was Attorney General, not long after Making a Murderer came out, assured the Holbach family that if necessary, they would retry Stephen Avery. But one wonders on what evidence they are going to have against him. Basically, nothing. Mind you, that's never stopped them putting Stephen Avery on trial twice before, so maybe they plan to do it again. But anyway, I'm of the opinion, and I think a lot of people are, that once this evidentiary hearing has been granted by whatever court, the District 2 Court of Appeals, or if it needs to go up to the Supreme Court, that this evidentiary hearing will lead to the immediate realisation that Stephen Avery's conviction was completely wrongful. But what's really important is to try and find out, obviously for Teresa's benefit, what really did happen to her. Let's try and find truth and justice. Let's find out who actually did cause her disappearance. Anyway, that's really all I've got time for today. I've got to go out and do a little gig, so we'll catch you again probably on Sunday night on the Eric Rosey channel, when we have a future live chat planned with, as I say, Rule and McGilla to discuss some of the things that we've looked at so far. And also, as I say, extend a welcome to Fleetside if you would care to join us, and let's have a look at your analysis of truther analyses. So we'll catch you again soon, probably Sunday. Bye for now.